She did it again. She sat down, she opened her mouth, and she lit whatever was left of her public image on fire in real time, on camera, in front of a former MVP who was too professional to say what his face was already saying for him. Claressa Shields walked into the Cam Newton interview thinking she was about to run a victory lap, thinking she was about to reset the narrative, thinking she was about to charm her way out of the corner the last 3 months of interviews had pushed her into. And instead, she delivered what might genuinely be the most self-incriminating hour and 20 minutes any active combat sports athlete has put on the internet this year. And I need you to understand something before we go any further, because this is the part everybody is missing. The Miss Chenica interview was not the disaster. That was the warning. The warning that this woman does not have the discipline, does not have the media training, does not have the situational awareness to sit in front of a microphone and talk about anything outside of a boxing ring without setting her own career on fire. The Cam Newton interview is what happens when you ignore the warning. And the truly wild thing, the thing that changes how you have to read this entire situation from the top, is that everybody is watching the drama and nobody is watching what the drama is actually costing her. There is a fight next week. There is a real, sanctioned, championship-level fight next week against Kay Scott, and the number of interview minutes that were spent on that fight versus the number of interview minutes that were spent on Papoose, on Remy Ma, on a marriage certificate she is pretending does not exist, on a baby that keeps moving further into the future every time she gets asked about it. That ratio, that specific ratio, is the story here. That ratio is why she is finished as a mainstream crossover star, even if she wins next week by knockout. Because when we get to the timeline breakdown later in this video, and I promise you we are getting there, you are going to see that everything she said to Cam, everything she is still saying, was already contradicted by her own words in interviews she did 2 weeks ago, and she does not even remember she said them. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. So let me set the whole board for you, because if you are new here, or if you have been trying to keep up with this mess from the outside, you need the full landscape before we start pulling threads. Claressa Shields is, objectively, one of the greatest female boxers of all time. 2-time Olympic gold medalist. Undisputed champion in 3 separate weight classes. 18 and 0. A biopic, The Fire Inside, that dropped in theaters on Christmas Day and had a genuine 3-month theatrical run. That is not a small resume. That is a Hall of Fame resume before she even turned 31. And that is exactly the part that makes what is happening now so catastrophic, because a resume like that is not supposed to be this fragile. A resume like that is supposed to be a fortress. Instead, we are watching it get dismantled brick by brick, and the person doing the dismantling is not a rival promoter, not a rival fighter, not a hater with a podcast, it is her. She is doing it to herself. Every single interview. Every single week. And the reason she is doing it to herself is because she made a decision, somewhere in the middle of last year, that her relationship with Papoose was going to be the main character of her public life instead of her boxing career. Papoose, the Brooklyn battle rapper, the guy known for the better part of 2 decades as the husband of Remy Ma, the guy who was, and this is not disputed, still legally married to Remy Ma at the moment Claressa started talking to him every single day on the phone. That is the timeline she is defending. That is the timeline she is trying to rewrite in real time in front of Cam Newton, in front of Miss Chenica, in front of Ariel Helwani, in front of every microphone she can find. And every time she tries to rewrite it, she contradicts something she said in the last rewrite. That is why this whole thing is unraveling. Because the truth, the actual documented timeline, is sitting on the internet in the form of her own words, and she keeps giving new interviews that fight the old interviews. The stakes for her personally right now are the biggest fight of her year, a fight nobody is talking about because everyone is talking about the man she is dating. The stakes culturally are what happens when a black woman with generational-level athletic accomplishments willingly trades her legacy in for reality television energy, and what that says about how women are marketed in combat sports. And the stakes on the industry level, the level nobody is actually breaking down, is what happens when a fighter's management team decides that engagement metrics are more valuable than reputation management, and greenlights every single one of these interviews knowing full well their client is going to walk in there and detonate. That is what we are actually watching. And by the time we get to the Cam Newton clip where she admits, out loud, to a former Heisman winner, that Papoose was in fact married when this all started, and then in the very next breath tries to argue that he is nobody's husband, you are going to see the entire architecture of this manufactured narrative fall apart in one sentence. Let's get into the surface evidence, because this is the stuff you can watch yourself right now, tonight, on YouTube, and confirm every word I am about to say. Exhibit 1. The Cam Newton interview itself is titled, and I want you to hear this, Claressa Shields on Love, Legacy, and Why She Chose Papoose. That is the title. Not the greatest female boxer of her generation. Not the two-time gold medalist preparing for her next title defense. Not the biopic subject on her Christmas Day theatrical run. Why she chose Papoose. Her own team approved that title. Her own team greenlit that framing. And she wants us to believe her relationship is not overtaking her career? The title of the interview she just did is literally the name of the man she is dating. That is not me spinning it. That is the thumbnail. Exhibit 2. In the interview, Cam Newton, and I want to give the man his props here, because he handled this with a kind of subtle intelligence that Claressa completely failed to pick up on. Cam Newton asks her, plainly, was Papoose married? And she says yes. She admits it. Yes, he was married. But then in the same interview, in a completely different segment, when the topic of the marriage comes up again, she pivots to saying he is nobody's husband. He is nobody's husband to me. Those two positions cannot coexist in the same conversation. Either the man is married, which she just conceded, or the man is not anyone's husband, which is legally, factually, on paper incorrect until a divorce decree is issued by a court. She wants to hold both positions at the same time because holding either one alone destroys her. If she says he is married, she is publicly a mistress. If she says he is not married, she is publicly a liar. So she oscillates between the two in the same hour and hopes nobody is paying attention. We are paying attention. Exhibit 3. The engagement ring. There is a photograph, and this is documented. This is not speculation. This is a photograph that Papoose himself posted and referred to as their anniversary, from what she claims was the first time they ever met, the Shakur Stevenson fight on July 6, 2024. In that photograph, on her hand, is the engagement ring given to her by her then-fiancé, Tony Rich. So on the very day she claims she first met the man she now calls her hubby, she is wearing another man's engagement ring. And within weeks, by her own admission in this Cam Newton interview, she and Papoose are on the phone every single night, falling asleep on FaceTime, for 6 straight months. Do the math with me on that. She says the phone thing lasted 6 months. Remy Ma exposed the situation in December of 2024. 6 months before December is June of 2024. But she says she did not meet him until July 6th of 2024. So either the 6 months is a lie, or the July 6th meeting is a lie. Both cannot be true. Pick one. Exhibit 4. The Ariel Helwani interview. When Helwani asked her about Remy Ma's music, Claressa played dumb. Oh, I do not really know her music. Meanwhile, in the same media cycle, she is quoting Papoose's discography, like she wrote the liner notes. You do not know one, but you know the other? The woman whose DMs you were in since 2020, whose husband you are now dating, whose life you have publicly stepped into, you do not know her music? That is not credible. That is not even a good lie. That is a lie told by someone who has stopped bothering to make her lies internally consistent. And oh, do I have more for you? Because what I just walked you through was the visible layer, the stuff sitting right on the surface for anybody with an internet connection. But the cultural layer, the insider layer, the stuff that is quietly circulating in the group chats and the barbershop conversations and the boxing insider podcasts, that is where this story goes from embarrassing to career-ending. And I promise you, the Papoose fans, the ride-or-die corner of her audience that is still trying to spin this into a love story, you are absolutely not going to like what is coming up in the next section, because it is not commentary anymore. It is receipts. Let's go into the cultural evidence, because this is the layer where the room stops laughing with her and starts laughing at her. First piece. Remy Ma has now done multiple interviews since the exposure moment where she has systematically, calmly, without ever raising her voice, dismantled the narrative Claressa is trying to build. On Angie Martinez's platform, Remy said plainly that she does not know how to date, that she is single, that she was with a man for 20 years, and now she is figuring out what her life looks like on her own. That interview aired 3 days before Claressa went on the Young Jack and Miss Chenica radio show and claimed that Remy has somebody. 3 days. Claressa either did not know that interview existed, which tells you her media team is not preparing her, or she knew and lied anyway, which tells you she thinks her audience is too stupid to fact-check her. Either interpretation is a disaster. Second piece. When you actually watch the Cam Newton interview with the sound off, and I recommend everybody do this at some point, you can see her looking off camera repeatedly. Not once. Not twice. Constantly. There is somebody in that room she is checking in with. Every time a difficult question lands, her eyes cut sideways. That is a woman who does not trust her own answers, who is looking for approval from a handler, who is trying to remember what she is supposed to say instead of just saying what is true. And in Black culture, in particular, that reading, that facial language, that side-eye energy, everybody catches it. Cam Newton caught it. He kept giving the camera that same look, that professional, I am going to let you finish but what you are saying does not track look. The same look every guest at a table gives when a person is talking themselves off a cliff and nobody wants to be the one to say stop. Third piece. Let's talk about the Miss Chenica exchange, because it has now been folded into the cultural memory of this story. Miss Chenica, on live radio, asked her, how long are you prepared to be someone else's husband? And Claressa's response was, and I am paraphrasing, but the sentiment is exact, first of all, he's nobody else's husband. Everybody in that studio outside of Claressa looked at each other. You could feel the room shift on the audio alone. That is the moment the tide turned. That is the moment the culture stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. Because it is not that she was asked a hard question. It is that she answered it in a way that told everybody in the room she is either delusional or dishonest, and the audience does not really care which one, because both are disqualifying. Fourth piece. The Papoose sunglasses. This is a small detail, but it is not a small detail. Papoose has now done multiple interviews, the DJ Vlad interview, the Danza Project, several podcasts, wearing sunglasses indoors. Remy Ma, in one of her live rants, made a specific point about this. She said, do a Willy-style live where you have to answer immediately, no time to think, no time to prepare, no shades to hide your eyes. She said that pointedly because she knows this man. 20 years of marriage means she knows his tells. And what she is telling the audience without saying it directly is that when this man tells the truth, you can see it in his eyes, and he does not want you to see his eyes right now. That is a woman who has forgotten more about Papoose than Claressa Shields will ever learn, and she is calmly, publicly, without ever needing to raise her voice, letting the world know he cannot be trusted right now. Fifth piece. There is a documented pattern of Claressa being in Remy's DMs going back to 2020. For years before the Shakur Stevenson fight where she claims she first met Papoose. She was building a relationship with the wife of the man she would later publicly date. She was in her space. She was cordial. She was friendly. And nobody in these interviews, not Cam Newton, not Miss Chenica, not Ariel Helwani, has pressed her on that piece of the puzzle. What kind of woman befriends the wife and then steps out with the husband? That is the question the culture is asking in the comments, and nobody at the microphone is asking directly. Sixth piece. She has now publicly stated, in this Cam Newton interview, that she has not met all of Papoose's children. She has not met the youngest. And this is a man she says is trying to have a baby with her next year. That is not a serious relationship. That is a man keeping her at arm's length from the parts of his life that matter most, and she is on national television describing it like it is romantic. And I want to acknowledge something here, because I want to be fair. Somebody in the comments right now is going to say, well, blended families are complicated, meeting kids takes time, do not judge. Fine. That is a fair counter. Except she is not saying they are taking it slow. She is saying they are having a baby in 2027. She is saying he calls her his queen, his best friend, his woman. She is getting tattoos referencing him. She is calling him her hubby on social media. You do not get to publicly perform the entire choreography of a serious relationship and then hide behind, well, it is complicated, when the timeline questions get uncomfortable. And that inconsistency, that constant motion between all in and hands off, depending on which question is being asked, is why the entire culture has now decided this story does not add up. Now here is where the video changes. Because up to this point, we have been talking about what everybody is talking about. The drama, the interviews, the timeline, the DMs, the sunglasses, the ring in the photograph. That is the entertainment layer. That is the layer that gets the clicks. But if you stay here, if you only look at this story as gossip, you are missing the actual story. Because the actual story is not about a rapper and a boxer and a betrayed wife. The actual story is about a management infrastructure around a two-time Olympic gold medalist that has made a series of catastrophically bad decisions, and about a broader combat sports media economy that is now designed to burn a female fighter's public image for engagement metrics while she is still in her physical prime. Let me break this down across 3 separate systemic angles because they all point to the same conclusion. Angle 1, the management failure. Claressa Shields right now is preparing for a title-level fight against Kay Scott, a fighter with 7 pro fights and 5 wins. That is not a marquee opponent. That is a fight her team booked knowing the story would have to be sold on something other than the athletic matchup. So her team made a strategic decision. Instead of selling the fight on the athletic merits, they sold access to Claressa's personal life. Every interview she has done in the last 3 months has been a personal life interview, not a boxing interview. That is not accidental. That is a promotional strategy. And that strategy is now backfiring in real time, because the personal life content is generating negative engagement, not neutral, not curiosity-driven, but actively hostile. And that negative engagement is bleeding into the fight's pay-per-view economics. Tickets, by multiple reports, are not selling the way a Claressa Shields main event should be selling. The engagement metrics look great on paper. The comment sections are on fire. The clips are viral. But viral does not equal buys. And her team is confusing attention with demand. That is a rookie promotional error being made by a team that should know better, and it is happening because they are afraid to tell their client no. Angle 2. The media ecosystem incentive structure. The reason she keeps getting booked for these interviews, even though every single one is a public disaster, is because her team gets paid on impressions and the podcasts get paid on impressions, and the algorithm rewards emotional reactions regardless of whether those reactions are positive or negative. So there is a perverse incentive stack where every party in the room, the fighter's PR team, the podcast host, the platform, the fight promoter, gets paid more when the fighter looks worse as long as the clips travel. That is why nobody in her camp is pulling her back. That is why nobody is saying maybe skip the next interview. Because the interview cycle is generating revenue for everyone involved except the person whose reputation is being cashed out to fund it. She is the product. She is not the beneficiary. And when we look at what this pattern historically does to a female combat sports athlete, see Ronda Rousey's post-home arc for a case study, you see that once the public turns on a woman fighter, they do not come back. Male fighters get redemption arcs. Female fighters get erased. The industry has demonstrated this pattern over and over again. Angle 3. The biopic problem. The Fire Inside came out on Christmas Day. It was in theaters for 3 months. That should have been the most valuable moment of her professional life. A theatrical biopic about a black female Olympic champion, released in the Christmas Day corridor traditionally reserved for prestige-tier releases. That is a career-defining launchpad. And it was completely, catastrophically, publicly overshadowed by the Papoose situation, which broke wide open in December, exactly the moment the movie was in theaters. Think about that. Think about the timing. The single biggest press moment of her career was hijacked by a relationship scandal that dropped in the exact same window. Now, was that timing accidental? Possibly. Was it exploited by every media outlet that wanted to run a Claressa Shields story that would perform better than a movie review? Absolutely. And her team, once again, failed to firewall the movie press from the relationship press. The 2 press cycles bled into each other, and the relationship cycle won, because scandal always outperforms accomplishment in the current attention economy. So her movie did not get its moment. Her championship legacy did not get its moment. Instead, what got its moment was a battle rapper's marital status. That is not just a personal PR failure. That is a structural failure of the entire team around her to understand what they were sitting on and how to protect it. And when you stack all 3 of these angles on top of each other, you see the full picture. She is not just embarrassing herself. She is being systematically monetized by an infrastructure that profits from her decline, and she is too surrounded by yes people to see it happening. Which brings us to the reveal. The thing you needed all 3 layers of evidence to understand. The thing that is not being said out loud anywhere on YouTube right now except right here. The Cam Newton interview did more damage to Claressa Shields' commercial career than the Miss Chenica interview did, and by a wide margin, and here is why nobody has clocked it yet. The Miss Chenica interview was 1 bad question and 1 bad answer, and it went viral for 1 specific line. That is containable. That is a single soundbite. You can survive a single soundbite. The Cam Newton interview is 1 hour and 20 minutes of unforced errors, back-to-back, in front of a mainstream sports audience that does not know her from boxing and now knows her only from this content. Cam Newton's audience is not the boxing audience. Cam Newton's audience is the sports culture audience, the NFL audience, the crossover audience, the exact audience she needed to reach if she was ever going to become a household name outside of the ring. And she went into that room and, in front of that audience, admitted the man is married, admitted she is having a baby with him next year even though he did not ask her a question about children, admitted she has not met all his kids, admitted her non-negotiable in the relationship was that they sleep on the phone together every night for 6 months in a timeline that mathematically overlaps with him still living with his wife, insulted her own boyfriend by describing his getting with her as him bagging above his level, described a downgrade Instagram model as somehow being a step down from her while calling that model bad, and used the phrase "our lives were never intertwined" about a man whose existing children will be biological siblings to the baby she is publicly planning. Every one of those admissions, taken alone, is bad. Stacked together, in one interview, in front of a mainstream crossover audience, they form what I believe is the definitive public record of the collapse of Claressa Shields as a mainstream commercial athlete. She is still going to fight. She is still going to win fights. She is still, physically, one of the best boxers in the world. But the crossover moment, the moment where she was supposed to become a Name Your Aunt in Ohio knew, the moment the fire inside was designed to catalyze, that moment is gone. It closed. And it closed in the Cam Newton studio, in real time, while she was smiling at the camera thinking she was cooking. That is the reveal. That is what nobody has said yet. She did not just lose a news cycle. She lost the ceiling. And you cannot get the ceiling back, because the audience that would have raised the ceiling has now filed her under a different category, and once you get filed under that category in mainstream sports media, you do not get refiled. Ask Ronda. Ask any woman fighter who let the personal life story eclipse the athletic story. The archive does not forgive. The algorithm does not forget. And the biopic that was supposed to be the launchpad is now the last artifact of the version of her career that could have been. And here is where I want to bring it home, because I want to make sure the right person in this story gets seen clearly. Remy Ma, through this entire episode, has done something that is genuinely remarkable in an era where everybody responds to everything immediately, loudly, publicly. She is moved with discipline. She is moved with grace. She has not gone on any podcast and screamed. She has not gone on any radio show and cursed anybody out. She has calmly, over the course of multiple interviews, told her side of the story once, provided the receipts once, and then gone back to focusing on her craft. She has had a genuine renaissance as a rapper this year, a resurgence, a reminder that the reason she has been in the culture for 2 decades is because she can actually rap, not because of who she was married to. She looks, by any honest observer's account, better than she has in years physically, mentally, spiritually. She is in a different bag entirely. And the contrast between the two women, the contrast between the person who is quietly winning by refusing to feed the drama and the person who is loudly losing by insisting on feeding it every week, is the entire moral of this story. One woman spent the last 4 months doing every interview she could get booked on. The other spent it in the studio, at the gym, focusing. One woman is now a punchline in comment sections she used to command. The other is being described in those same comment sections as the one who came out of this with her dignity intact. That is not an accident. That is what happens when you understand the difference between attention and respect. Claressa optimized for attention. Remy optimized for respect. And in every long game that has ever been played in this culture, respect beats attention. Every single time. And I want the audience watching this to take that seriously, because this is not just a story about 2 women and a rapper. This is a story about what your professional discipline looks like when the whole world is watching, about whether you are going to feed the algorithm what it wants at the expense of your own future, or whether you are going to build something that outlasts the news cycle. Remy is building. Claressa is broadcasting. And the culture, in the long run, always rewards the builder. That is why, when we look back at this whole saga in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, the person who is going to look correct, the person who is going to look like they made the right choices, is not going to be the one who is in every interview. It is going to be the one who kept her head down and let the receipts speak for themselves. That is the resolution. That is the landing pad. The right person in this story is still winning. Even when it looks like she is not saying anything, she is saying everything. And the wrong person in this story keeps talking. And the more she talks, the more she confirms the position she is trying to escape. But do not think for a second that this is over. Because this is only the start. There are 2 things I am watching right now that are going to break in the next few weeks and are going to make this Cam Newton episode look like the warm-up. Number 1, the timeline. I am working on a full timeline breakdown video right now that will lay out, date by date, receipt by receipt, message by message, the entire documented sequence of events from 2020 to today, and when that video drops, there is going to be nowhere left for anybody in this saga to hide. If you want that video, drop the word timeline in the comments of this video, and if we hit the number, that is the next video up. Number 2, the fight itself. The K. Scott fight is coming, and depending on how the buy rate looks and how the gate reports come in, we are going to have hard financial data on whether this promotional strategy actually worked or whether it burned money that this camp cannot afford to burn. That data is going to tell us whether the team keeps this strategy for the next fight or whether they finally pull her back. Either way, I am covering it. Either way, you need to be subscribed for it, because when the numbers hit, this channel is going to be first with the analysis nobody else is doing. So drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe if you have not already, because we are only just getting started. And the next video up is going to walk you through the one detail from Papoose's own recent interviews that completely undermines the story he and Claressa have been telling in sync. A single sentence he said on camera that Claressa clearly did not know he said. That contradicts her Kim Newton answers word for word, and that once you hear it, you are not going to be able to unhear it. That video is up next. Do not close the tab. Do not click away. Click through. Because the sunglasses came off for 1 second in one interview, and what he said in that second changes everything. We unpacked